today we have a special guest, Brian Levin, and Brian is going to talk about managing storage on your Apple devices. And I want to let you know that Brian is a director, a producer, and an editor who is based in LA. And with that, he would know a lot about storage issues on different devices. So please, we're going to welcome Brian and have plenty of questions. So with that, I'm going to stop my share and hand it off to Brian.
1 second here.
All right.
Okay. You should have that now, yeah?
Got it. Yes. Thank you.
Okay. Great. Well, thanks everyone for having me here. I'm happy to come talk about this. As Cheetah said, I'm mostly an editor based in Los Angeles, and storage is sort of like a daily concern of mine. It's even at a professional level, we deal with storage in every possible way, from huge jobs to even tiny jobs, and trying to figure out what the best methodologies are for dealing with those storages. So I think the first thing I'd want to know before I jump into this, I'm just curious, of the people that are on this call, what do you generally do on your computers? Just a quick, I'm a teacher, I'm an editor, I'm just kind of curious, what the makeup of audience is.
Okay. Well, I'm a teacher and an editor, literally. Anyone else?
Older, tired guy.
Older, tired guy. Okay. Personal editing, John Prescott. Hope is a teacher.
Okay, perfect.
Gail's retired Mac consultant.
Okay, perfect. Okay, great. Oh, a lot of photographers, video editors.
Yes.
Okay. Oh, great. Okay, perfect. We have lots to talk about. As she said, my name is Brian, and she already gave me an introduction, so we'll just skip this page and go to the next one. So when it comes to storage, the most important thing is that what your needs are depends on how you plan to use it. So, the first thing that I would like to think about when I think about dealing with storage and deciding upon storage and deciding what kind of computer I need and how to future-proof is, what am I even going to be doing with this computer? I try not to make decisions willy-nilly. I try to think, years out, how will this storage be valuable to me in the future? Because we don't want to overspend, of course, on storage, but we want storage that's going to last a long time, but not all storage lasts forever. So you do have to eventually be upgrading. So just kind of thinking about how you can get the most bang for your buck by thinking about the future uses of that storage. So how you use it is always sort of the biggest deciding factor for me in coming up with what I'm going to do when it comes to getting some storage. So I consider these factors first and foremost when I think about storage. First is the speed of that storage. The second is the size of that storage. And lastly would be the price of that storage. So when I think about speed, this is something that I think if you don't know about storage speed, it's an important thing to be paying attention to. Now, if you're just a photographer or a teacher or somebody who is not dealing with high volume files, so files that are gigantic, that need to be read and write very often, specifically video files, this maybe isn't as important to you. I mean, having fast storage is useful, but it's not crucial. So if you're in the video world, having fast storage is crucial. There's this tool, the Blackmagic disk speed test, that you can get for free on the App Store, and you can run it on any storage device that you have. You just target the device and you say start speed test, and it kind of tells you okay, well, here's what you can reasonably use this particular storage volume to accomplish in the video editing world. Now, I have right now a hard drive plugged into my computer. It's a pretty fast SSD, and on it is a bunch of 4K H.265 footage from a comedy show that I'm in the middle of editing. And so when we talked about getting storage for this particular project, I knew I was going to have 8 cameras and a multicam that I had to cut between regularly. I was going to have to display the multicam panel in Premiere so I can see all 8 different cameras. I need super fast storage because otherwise there's no way I'm going to be able to play that back. So we decided on a fast SSD to accomplish that. So when I think about the use case of something, this fast SSD was really quite expensive, but it was necessary for this particular job. Whereas on another job where I maybe only have one camera, I would say, oh, you don't need as expensive of a product for this. You can get something less expensive, a little more modestly priced. It will accomplish the same thing. So the speed is a major consideration. Next is how big that hard drive needs to be. Now, when you think about hard drives, both internal and external, nowadays with a Mac, basically every hard drive is going to be SSD, internal hard drive is going to be an SSD. So you're not going to have the hybrid drives you used to have, no more spinning disk drives, all that's of the past. So everything inside your computer is going to be an SSD. But outside of your computer that you plug into your computer, there's a lot of options out there, and the options are ever growing. I mean, I actually have written an article about NVMe drives as well. So those are a totally separate thing than SSDs, than spinning disk drives. There's all these different things that are out there as it pertains to what types of drives. And different drives have the abilities to have different sizes. So SSDs at the moment generally live roughly at the 4 terabyte. There is an 8 terabyte out there, but I'm not sure if I would trust it just yet. It's really, really hot on the market, fresh. But the 4 terabyte, the 2 terabyte, that's like a sweet spot as far as SSD is concerned. But if you're talking about spinning disk drives, I have a ton of those in ranges anywhere from 10 to 30 terabytes. So deciding on, hey, I need something that's going to be this large, well, to help you understand what sort of drive you need. Next is price. Obviously, you have a budget to consider and you don't want to overspend on your needs. But again, thinking about how you plan to use this thing. So if you say, oh, okay, I have this 4 terabyte hard drive, I'm only going to use 1 terabyte of it for this one project. So I have 3 more terabytes available to disperse across other projects. Well, the price per project has come down now. So thinking about, okay, well, how can I use this drive? How can I repurpose this drive? How can I make sure the data on this drive will be safe and taken with me where I need it to be? And comparing all that with the price of the drive, again, this is just another consideration I take into when I think about what I'm going to get as far as drives go. So let's start with just the most basic of users. To me, a basic user is someone who's going to do their email, watch their Netflix, go on the internet and browse Reddit or whatever people like to go on the internet for these days, and look at your photos, just basic computer stuff, right? If you're a basic user, there's a pretty high probability you don't really need some sort of external storage volume. Most Mac computers are going to come at a base level of 256 gigabytes in terms of the lowest level of storage that's available on the machine. And that's honestly quite a lot, especially if really all you have are some photos and Safari and, you're not really doing a ton on the computer. So you probably won't even see that fill up. However, if you are a basic Mac user, you also probably have iCloud Drive. If you're not somebody who typically uses or interacts with cloud storage solutions, iCloud Drive is kind of the perfect thing for you because it's part of your Mac ecosystem. So it's just it's on your iPhone, it's on your Apple Watch, it's on all your Apple devices. Basically, if you have an Apple account, you've got an iCloud Drive. And it's this weird thing that's a little bit difficult to manage. It's not as user-friendly, I think, as something like a Dropbox where you have like a lot more control over how that storage works, but it's there. So basically, whenever you take photos on your iPhone, those can be automatically stored on your iCloud Drive or on your iCloud account. So they're not taking up storage on either your computer or your mobile device. So this is a really great tool for people who have small hard drives, who are basic users, where all this stuff will be stored in the cloud and only called upon when needed. So only downloaded to your local system when necessary. Thinking about what sort of computer you might want if you're just a basic Mac user, as of last night when I made this presentation, what I saw on Apple's website would be something like a Mac Mini or a MacBook Air. The MacBook Air I've had over the years, I've had different MacBook Airs, and honestly, absolutely brilliant piece of technology. Like, it's super thin. It's basically like a Kindle. Like, it's small. Like, I used to just take a MacBook Air with me plus my MacBook Pro laptop just so I could pull something out quickly, flip it open and start working, like it was like, oh, I just need to make some notes. MacBook Air comes out, right? It was like the most amazing little machine. And now the MacBook Airs, I have an M1 chip in them. They're honestly blazing fast. Not that you would, but you could video edit on them if you absolutely had no choice and you had to. The same goes for the Mac Mini. If you're more of a desktop person, you want to have a home office and you have a business and you want to have computers at the desks at the office. The Mac Minis are really delightful. They're small. They're actually very, very powerful. They're very, very compact. They have an M2 chip in them now. Like, people are using them as render farms because of how powerful just the base level Mac Mini is. So a really amazing piece of technology. And again, these are very modestly priced as far as Apple products go. So the next thing I think about, and this is sort of born of the pandemic, is the work from home person. You're not necessarily a basic user. You're not necessarily a power user, but you're working on a system at home. You need it to be a little bit beefier than you need for just your personal use. You don't want to go crazy and get like a super powered, high-end system that you don't necessarily need to tap into. So the next thing I think about for them is to go MacBook Pro. It's kind of the perfect middle ground as far as all things Mac are concerned. In fact, for me, I have an office where I have my super powered machine and all my hard drives and everything. But then when I come home at the end of the night and I'm tired and I don't want to go back to the office to finish work, I have a MacBook Pro at home where I can basically just get to my desk at home, work for a couple hours in the evening or before I go to bed, and it's a perfectly powerful computer. It gets everything done that it needs to. And the MacBook Pro has customizable storage. So this is just the base level with 1 terabyte of SSD storage. You can crank this number up to 8, which is huge. Now, for me at home, I only went up to 4, just from a price consideration. I didn't need the 8 at home, and it was like an extra $1,000. So I was like, it's a little steep of a price to go all the way to the 8. That being said, over the years, I'm sort of kicking myself for making this decision. I always sort of backtracked on what I needed as far as storage goes. I would always go, I'll just go one step down for pricing considerations. But then, 3 years into the life of the computer, I'm wishing I had that 8 terabyte drive in there. So I have started now, as I go forward and purchase new computers, think to myself, wait a second, Brian, don't think of what you're going to spend in this very moment today. Think about how that's going to be useful to you 3 or 4 years from now as you continue to live on this computer and use it to work. So, back in October when I bought this computer, or whatever this was in October, I was like, okay, 4 terabytes will be perfect. And now I'm sort of like 8 months later, I'm down to 1.7 terabytes remaining, and it's only getting lower by the day. And I'm like, oh boy, I'm going to get to 0 quicker than I would like to, So again, price versus the size is always a consideration to be thinking about, and thinking about the future as you do that. Next is if you're somebody who's going to work from home and you potentially also have to work from other locations, or if you're a work from home user, it's very possible that you like to work not just from home, but you want to get out. Maybe you go to a co-working space. Maybe you rent an office. Maybe you travel often and you want to bring your work with you. Or maybe you should just take a vacation and don't work while you travel, whatever is your thing, but you probably are going to need some sort of external storage. And I'm speaking mainly to people who have high volumes of files. So this is the video editors in the room, the photographers in the room, people who have tremendous amounts of data to deal with on a regular basis. For me, the 2 hard drives that I basically have littered around my house and my office are essentially these. So I've always been a G drive fanatic. I've used them since the day they came out. I still use them today. I basically have G drives couriered to my office like once a week from different clients for different projects. They really are tremendous workhorse drives. They go up to 20 terabytes. I think there's actually a 24 at this point. And again, I have a lot of these. Like, if I could show you my shelf, because I'm not at the office right now, but if I could show you my shelf, it's just like top to bottom G drives, basically. These are, the G drives are fast-ish. They're not SSDs. So they're not as fast as an SSD would be, but they are good for all things video editing. They're great sources of consistency. They work great. They stack nicely. They look like a Mac, so they fit aesthetically in your workspace. And if you get the enterprise version with the Thunderbolt 3, you can daisy chain them. So if you have few ports on the back of your computer and you need an extension of ports, one of these drives will have an extra Thunderbolt 3 out the back of it that you can daisy chain more hard drives onto, or use it to daisy chain peripherals like a keyboard or a mouse. So those for me are sort of the best thing to do. They're also honestly very moderately priced for what they are. I mean, we're looking at something that I've just looked at here at 18 terabytes. It's only $1,000. Apple wanted $1,000 just to put an 8 terabyte drive in my computer. Like for $1,000, you get 18 terabytes. You're not gonna. I mean, if you were scrambling for the extra 4 terabytes internal storage, and then you ended up with 18 more, you're probably not scrambling to fill the 18, like you're probably not going to get up to 18 anytime soon. So again, these drives are fantastic. Now, on the other hand, is the SSDs. These are tiny. I mean, these drives are very small, like they're like this big. And I have, I take my backpack with me everywhere, and my backpack is full of these drives, basically. Like I just am constantly like, oh, I have this project with me. I got to work on this today or whatever. These drives come with me all the time. Whenever I have to travel, I try to consolidate the work that I need to do on these drives. For one, they fit in your luggage better. They don't have moving parts, so they're SSDs. There's less chance for failure as they move and get shuttled around the airplane and put in the overhead compartment or whatever. So they're great. There is one thing, however, to be very, very cautious of. Actually, two things to be cautious of. One, SSDs are more prone to failure. So SSDs will not last forever. You have to back up whatever's on this. So don't just put it on this and be like, oh, it's great, it's on a hard drive. Like, please back up your footage. Always, always, always have another backup of your footage somewhere else besides this SSD. It's not a matter of if it's going to fail. It's a matter of when it's going to fail. It's not going to fail the day you buy it, but like one day you're going to plug it in, it's just not going to work. Like it's very possible, right? The second is that as of today, there is no solution to what is a known firmware issue with these specific hard drives. They are just erasing people's files. It hasn't happened to me yet, so fingers crossed it doesn't happen, but it's a known issue. It's really, people are very vocal about it right now on the forums. So just as you go ahead and purchase drives, do your research. Like when you go to purchase something, make sure to really dig into research about what is happening with those drives. Is there a recall? Are people saying bad things about them? Just to make sure that you don't get yourself something like, oh, this is going to be great, it's got 5 stars on Amazon. Like, don't trust that. Go do some good independent outside research.
Brian,
yeah,
is that just those SanDisk or SSDs?
Just the SanDisk. Yeah.
Okay. Because Costco's selling a lot of these. Okay.
At a huge discount, yes, at 67% off.
Historically, the ones I've seen at Costco have been a lot cheaper than this.
Yeah, I know.
Okay.
There's a reason why they're so cheap right now.
Okay, because they're failing. Okay, great.
Yeah, because they're failing. They're like desperately trying to like offload their. So like again, like it hasn't happened to me. The reports are. I don't want to say the reports are not few and far between, but the reports are statistically not. Statistically, it's not going to probably happen to you. But I don't know. You just don't want to be like the one guy, where it's like
that is correct. That is correct. That's correct.
You're like, oh, my kid's birthday party was on there. It's like, nope, not anymore. It's all gone.
Okay.
All right. So last up would be the sort of heavy duty super users. This is going to be someone like me. So I have a small post-production business. I'm editing on a daily basis. I have tons of clients that I'm working for. I have terabytes upon terabytes upon terabytes of footage at my office right now that I'm constantly like having to pull drives, plug them in, keep storage safe, things like that. I need a beefy computer. I need a ton of storage in that computer. I need to basically max things out. And that's what this basically is. So the Mac Studio, this is a relatively new thing as of last year. The problem is that after they released it and everyone was in love with it, and it is truly a really beautiful, amazing machine, they basically said, we're no longer supporting it, which is like such an Apple thing to do. But bummer, right? Because this is a really amazing machine. The ports on the back of it, there's, 4 Thunderbolt 3 ports, 3 USB 3, Ethernet, yeah. So sorry, one second. Chatted. So in terms of storage, this, just like the MacBook Pros, can go up to 8 terabytes. So I maxed mine out, and I'm honestly very happy that I made that choice, because if I was initially like, oh, I'll go with the 4 terabyte, like it'll be a modest price. Then I was like, no. You have to max it out. Like, max this thing out. You can't change it after the fact. So it's built into this. If you go too low, like 4 to 8 is double. Like, that's a lot more storage. And if I were to look at my computer right now at work, I think I'm down to like 2 terabytes of free space, because I was just like, wow, I really am going to use this much storage. And a lot of it has to do with the way that I work. Of course, I have external storage. There's no way to put all of my work on the internal storage of this computer, but I can do a majority of the work I need to do in the moment on the internal storage. And then there are huge projects that are, terabytes upon terabytes of footage. Those are, of course, on external drives. The media is. So heavy-duty super users, I strongly recommend checking out the Mac Studio. Now, if there's a world in which Apple reveals something new in June or October of this year, and that new thing is an iMac that is as powerful or more powerful than the Mac Studio, then I would go back to an iMac. Honestly, I loved the iMac, but at the moment, they only have a 24-inch iMac, not a 27-inch. So we can talk about screens another time, but 27 inches is really the sweet spot as far as video editing software user interfaces go. So if you are also somebody who's a heavy-duty super user and you need tremendous amounts of storage, the other thing to consider is, do I need a ginormous large volume of storage like a RAID? So SanDisk makes RAIDs, OWC makes RAID. I mean, tons of people make RAIDs. RAIDs can go up to 80, 100 terabytes. Jellyfish makes RAIDs. Like, there's tons of options for RAIDs. They are, as you can see, very, very expensive. You can basically buy another computer for the cost of a RAID. RAID, however, is huge. It's got prevention of data loss, because things are backed up inside of the RAID. So if one drive fails, you just swap the drive out, put a new drive in, and your data is still safe. There's redundancies inside of it that protect you from having that kind of failure. They are huge. The problem is they're huge. You can't really take them with you. So if everything is on that RAID, and you're like, oh, I'm going to go work at a coffee shop, you're probably not going to like grab that RAID and like walk into the Starbucks, and like try to like plug it into the wall, like start working. Like, that's not going to work for you. So, this is great for like, this is never leaving the office, and as far as getting more detailed on like really detailed information about this, I work with this company, Film Editing Pro. I do a lot of training for them, and they made a video that I helped them with earlier this year that I highly recommend watching if you want a really, really, really detailed analysis of RAIDs, how to build your own RAID. Like, this video is like half an hour long, it goes into a lot of detail. And they basically break it down to say that, like, if you need a huge amount of storage, you're going to have to spend a huge amount of money. But if you think about the way that you're going to work and how you parse that out across different storage devices, you can not necessarily spend that kind of money on one large volume of storage. I mean, I'm sort of wishy-washy on whether one singular large volume of storage is the right move for this sort of a thing, for a video editing company or a photography company that needs to keep all their storage in one place, because of things like Dropbox or Box.com or Google Drive, which have unlimited storage on them on a cloud-based service. You can sync it to your computer. It acts as 2 of your 3 sort of required backups for storage. So you can put one on Dropbox, the Dropbox can sync to your local device, and then the third place for backing up your storage can be a hard drive that someone else has or something like that. But, as far as it goes to, do you need something like a Jellyfish? Do you need something like a SanDisk RAID? I don't know, like, I don't have one, and I'm operating pretty great without it. but I also can see the value of having something like that. So I'm very wishy-washy on that. Let's talk about mobile devices, because not everyone is a computer user. I know a lot of people who don't even have a computer and they just live off of their mobile devices. So obviously, if you're in an Apple group, you have an iPhone, and iPhones come in 4 flavors: 128, 256, 512, and 1 terabyte, depending on which iPhone you get. Look, for me, at least on my iPhone, everything is sort of cloud-based. Like everything that exists in some sort of cloud-based environment. My iPhone storage is not filled up at all, and I have a 256. Like I barely fill my iPhone up. All my photos are synced to Photos or to iCloud. So like I don't feel like I need a huge amount of storage. That being said, I don't do a ton of work on my mobile device. So if I was doing things like making TikTok videos or Instagram videos, and I was using CapCut and I was saving videos, and I was constantly having videos synced to my Photos app, I would probably go for a higher storage, because that is going to take up a lot of space. But because I don't typically work on my mobile device other than just, texting and getting maps and, taking photos and stuff, there's no reason for just the basic mobile phone user to need something more than like a 256. And again, the prices of mobile devices are absolutely insane. You shouldn't spend $1,500 on a phone, but that's the world we live in. So at the end of the day, the whole thing, I think, is about trying to keep things simple for your workflow. The second you get into a world where you're talking about having some sort of RAID or large volume of storage that requires you to manage it, it becomes significantly more complex than just having a plug and play drive. So if you're somebody who's like, I don't want to deal with that complexity, then make a system of storage that works for you that is simple. But if you do like to dig into the complexity of things, and a large volume of storage makes sense for you, then yeah, definitely go with a RAID. Go with something like a Jellyfish. They're very, very expensive, but they're very, very powerful. And they have Jellyfish Remote, which lets collaborators work with you remotely and access that drive. So, lots of options out there. But the level of complexity, I think, is sort of the key deciding factor on what you want to do with your storage.
Okay. I have a question.
Yeah.
You do have people who, if they'll purchase a large drive to work with their system, they also decide that they want to partition it to use that drive with other things. What is your thoughts on that?
Where would you use it besides your system? Like partition it so you can use it on Mac and PC?
Well, say for example, they bought an 18 terabyte drive and they want to use it to store their photographs or their photo library. But at the same time, they also want to use it as a backup for their Mac laptop. What do you suggest that they do something like that?
So you mean like the drive is used as just like a regular storage volume, but also as a time machine backup?
Not necessarily a time machine, but maybe a super duper backup or a time machine backup. Yes.
There's no reason to partition your hard drive unless you plan to do something to one of the partitions that will require it to be like held hostage by the operating system. So that would be like a time machine backup. But otherwise, there's no reason to partition. Just put folders on the drive and be organized.
Okay. Would you recommend that they use 2 separate drives for the 2 different?
No, I mean, again, like it depends on your use case, really. It depends on like how you are going to use it. So like, for example, this hard drive I have right here,
right.
I did a project with someone and he gave me 2 terabytes worth of footage. And I said, okay, great. I'm going to put it on this 4 terabyte hard drive. I have 2 terabytes left on this drive. So another person from a totally separate project said, hey, I've got about 1 terabyte worth of footage for a project. Do you have room for it? And I was like, I do, because I have a hard drive here with 2 free terabytes. So this drive has 2 separate projects on it from 2 different clients. It's my drive, and I put 2 different things on it. So if I need to work on either one of these 2 things, I bring this drive with me. And if I don't need this drive, I'm not going to work on those projects, I don't bring this drive with me. And so I can just sort of, I don't need to partition it. There's no reason to partition it. I don't want to have multiple partitioned volumes mounted on my Finder window.
Okay. All right. Question. Hank Humphrey, you have a question. Can you please unmute yourself and ask your question?
Yes, sir. I have a 2019 iMac with 27-inch, and I love it, and I want to keep it. And you just said they're doing away with the studio, so
Yeah,
or they're not going to.
I had a 2019 Intel, the last Intel iMac, basically, which is what you have.
Yeah.
It's the last
Yep.
Intel machine that's probably ever going to get made from Apple.
Yes.
And man, M1 machines are like everything that you've been told that they are. They are beyond crazy good. Like, they are so fast. I was a late adopter, and I'm just like kicking myself. I should have just done it the day of. Like,
Yeah, but there's not an M1 27-inch.
Yours is an M1.
No, there's not an M1
No, there is, correct. There
27-inch.
is
That's
not.
why I say, how do I move up? That's what,
Yeah. There is no M1 27-inch. Right.
Yes.
Exactly. Isn't that crazy? They have to release one. They have to.
All right.
I mean,
just wait.
just wait. I guess just wait. I mean, if your computer's holding out, then just hold out till you're happy with, because I mean, if you're an iMac person, if you want to replace what's one of the greatest things of the iMac, which is the screen, with another screen, you have to spend $1,500 to do it. You know, like, if you want, did you get the nano texture glass?
No, not
Okay.
I just
well, on your next computer, get the nano texture glass, because that is the most amazing technology. Like, it has no glare, no reflection. It's like looking at a piece of paper. Like, it's absolutely beautiful to look at. And it reduces eye strain very, very well. But I had a 2019 Intel iMac with the nano texture glass, and I was unwilling to give up the nano texture glass. So when I moved to the Mac Studio, I had to get the Apple Studio display. And that's 27 inches, but with the nano texture glass, on top of the display being expensive in the first place, that's $1,500. So on top of buying an expensive Mac Studio, I now had to buy a $1,500 monitor to go with it. $1,500 is basically half the cost of an iMac, you know? So, like, you know, yeah. So I would wait because they got to release a 27-inch iMac. They have to.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, Hank, thank you for that. Giovanni, you're next, and then Melissa, you're after Giovanni. Giovanni? John, John Buckley, you want to ask the same question?
Yeah, this is Giovanni. What about network access storage, NAS?
Oh, NAS? Yeah. So that's basically what the rate is. So, and I should have been more explanatory about that, but yeah, a NAS. So you know, a NAS is going to be valuable if you work with multiple people who want to access the same data in the same space. So you might have a small office and you might have a large NAS, so that, you know, 4 or 5 different users can all access it over the fiber cables, and everyone can access it like a singular mounted volume. So you are all working on the same thing. Like a Drobo would be a NAS, something like that. Yeah, if that's your situation, a NAS makes a lot of sense for you. You know, they are extremely expensive. They have to be managed. They're not easy to manage. You know, there's a lot of points of failure of a NAS. I don't love it. I don't love using it. I've worked in offices with a NAS. It's always messy, you know, because people don't generally respect the organizational rules that you might set up in a workflow on a NAS. They just start treating it like their own personal volume. And that's where things become very complicated. So personally, when I work with collaborators, you know, everyone's remote for me, but even when I work with collaborators, I share them a Dropbox folder. And I say, like, you can work in here. Here's how I want it done. I can monitor that folder if I want to, but what they do in their folder doesn't really impact the greater NAS on my Dropbox, basically, right? So they are only impacting one spot, and that spot's very siloed from everything else. They don't have access to everything. So a NAS, you kind of have access to everything unless you give permissions to certain users. As far as what NAS to get, I would definitely shop vendors. You got to shop for price. NASs are so expensive. And you have to shop for just user reviews. How long will this NAS live? how often you're going to have to be swapping out drives in this thing, how expensive is it going to be over time, how big can you get it? Like if you get an 80 terabyte NAS or 100 terabyte NAS, is that going to be enough for the next 10 years? Like, because you're going to spend like $15,000-$20,000 on this thing,
Yeah. All right. Answer your question, Giovanni?
Oh, yes. Thank you.
All right. Wonderful. All right. Melissa's question, which she asked me to ask because there's noise outside. She wants to know, Brian, how do you keep track of various projects combined on different drives?
Yeah. Well, post-it notes are one way of doing it. No, so I have a good amount of space in my office to put things. So what I have is next to my desk, when you go to Home Depot and you buy those like wire racks for your garage, just like the wire mesh racks, like the metal ones, I have one of the small ones, right? Like the sort of like kitchen ones. So you have 3 tiers of this wire rack. And this is great because there's holes between the wires. So that's where cables can go down and through. So you don't have messy cables all over the place. But at the center of the wire rack, I have a power strip type thing where I can easily plug things in, and then the wires go up through there. And then on the top of the rack is where my hard drives are. And then the rack is just sort of divided by what I'm working on. And if it's not something that I'm actively working on, like it's not an active project, it goes into a closet, and the closets are divided by client. So it's like, all of one client goes here, all of one client goes here, all of this client goes here, that kind of a thing. And then, there are a tremendous amount of jobs that are not even on hard drives. I mean, they're on Dropbox, so they're not on a drive.
Okay, wonderful. James Corsica, can you please unmute yourself and ask your question?
Thank you. Hi, Brian. I have 4 external hard drives, one for Super Duper, one for Time Machine, one for my music and video library, and then a backup to the music and video library external drive. Okay, I live in maybe not constant fear, but occasional fear of the failure of especially the ones that have the music and the video on them. Are there any external hard drives that have some sort of an early warning failure?
No.
An area in the coal mine kind of thing.
No, you'll just wake up one day and that'll be that. There's a rule, the 3-2-1 rule. You should always have 3 copies of your footage in 2 different places at one time. So basically, if you have something that's very important and very valuable to you and you can't afford to lose it, there should be 3 copies of it out in the world that are in 2 separate places at any one given time. So your music and video, if you have 2 hard drives, that's great. But now you need to get a 3rd place of backup. And a good thing for that would be some sort of cloud storage. So Google Drive, iCloud Drive, Dropbox, Box.com, whatever you like to use, whatever your needs are.
I can move my entire music library to Dropbox?
Absolutely.
Done. Thank you so much.
Okay, good. Very interesting. I do want to add to Jim and Brian. I did have a hard drive that gave me a warning that it was about to fail. It made a ding that I had never heard before. And I immediately thought, did I back up my stuff? I ran to my computer, backed up my stuff. As soon as that backup ended, that drive failed. Never to be seen again.
Wow.
All right. Okay. But good. Michael Snyder, you have a question. Can you unmute yourself and ask your question?
Yeah, hi. I've been reading about this, but it never affected me until recently. Where an external hard drive that's attached to a Mac will spontaneously unmount itself from the desktop when the computer goes to sleep. So when the computer basically, I expect it to be mounted when I wake up the computer in the morning. It's always been that way before, but this one hard drive, this newer one that I got, dismounts itself when the computer goes to sleep. And I've been reading about this online, and apparently it's a known issue. People complain about it under Ventura. And that's what's happening. So I was wondering if you'd heard about that, if you know that, is it a bug in Ventura? Nobody's admitting to it, but What's going on, or is it an issue with a hard drive?
It's probably the hard drive. I've had it happen before, and I just sort of take that hard drive out of rotation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Thank you for your question. Richard Sias, can you please unmute yourself and ask your question? Richard? Richard's question
I'm
is...
trying to unmute. I get there.
Go ahead. Go ahead. I was trying to make time.
The other gentleman was asking about the safety of a drive given early warning. And on my spinning drives, twice I've had this thing called SMART warn me that it was saving my material to another location and I should consider looking to replace the drive in the coming months. And after I got the third time it happened that in 1 month, I went out and bought another drive and backed it all up, and a week later it died. Twice, 2 different drives. Is anything like that on SSDs or some SSDs?
I think that some have something like that. I mean, I think that well, SSDs are a little tough in that regard because there's no moving parts, you know, like Smart is able to detect like, you know, it's the health of the planner, right? Like it kind of like you can like read what's going on in there, you know, with the mechanical components. Like it's easy to be like, oh, the tension of this spring is different. Like they can measure those things. So it's easy to have something that understands that. But on a SSD, there's no moving parts in there. So it's hard to just be like, this disk's not going to make it, you know, like I think that Crucial has something. I don't really use any of those things. I guess I just sort of make backups. I mean, because you kind of just have to assume that one day the drive is not going to function.
I think your suggestion of 3 items in 3 locations. So in case a hurricane blows through and knocks your house down and crushes everything, you got 2 more places with everything.
Yeah.
And if suddenly a fire breaks out in another one during that hurricane, you still got 1 left.
Exactly. And it's not very likely that's going to happen, but you know, you're
yeah,
right.
but it's happened to people before. They've mentioned it in the news. You know, this is, I got 2 places trashed.
Yeah. I mean, look, cloud storage is not that expensive. So getting things into cloud storage, definitely.
Okay. Thank you for your question. Jill, you're next with your question, and John Prescott, you're after Jill. Jill, can you please ask Brian your question?
Yes, thank you. Brian, I'm probably the least knowledgeable member of this group. I have to admit that I don't know how much storage I need. I don't know how much has already been used on the devices that I have, and they're all ancient, just like me. How do I find out what I need to get in the way of a storage device?
Yeah, I mean, so it sounds to me like you're probably a basic user, right? So you're not, you know, somebody who needs to be aware of the amount of storage that they need, because most of the work that you're doing on your computer is probably personal work. You're browsing the internet, you're watching videos, you're looking at photos, you know, basic stuff, right? So if your computer is working great for you, for your needs, then you're probably in good shape. But if you're thinking about an upgrade and you're thinking about a new computer, then you probably need a base model of something. It's not likely that you need to upgrade the storage for some reason, based on what it sounds like you're doing on the machine. If you're trying to figure out, well, how do I find out what I even have in the first place and how much space I have left? You can find that out on your computer by just looking at the Macintosh hard drive icon on your desktop and pushing the space bar. That will bring up this little window that tells you you have, you know, this size of hard drive and you have this much space remaining left on it.
Right. Thanks very much for that. This is also part of the same question. I seem to be paying Apple monthly for cloud storage. I think it's mainly for photographs.
Yeah.
A lot seem to be duplicating themselves. I don't know how they're multiplying behind my back.
Yeah, I know. I know. I don't know the answer to that. I'm so sorry. I'm paying Apple monthly as well, and I don't know why.
Oh, dear.
I literally don't know. I literally do not. I do not understand their storage solution. I don't understand their cloud solution. It is the most mind-bogglingly complicated thing, which is crazy because Apple is so simple in every other way. But this one thing is really, really complicated for some reason. I personally, when it comes to like some sort of cloud storage backup, I'm a Dropbox guy. I love Dropbox. I've written articles about Dropbox. I could go on and on for hours about Dropbox and how to use it and how useful it is and all these things. So basically everything I have is on Dropbox. Of course, I do pay Apple $3 a month for whatever it is they're charging me for to have photos, I guess. But I don't really have an understanding of like how much space that is or how big my photos are. It doesn't tell you, and I'm not going to bother to go find out because it's like, oh, $3 a month, not a big deal, But yeah, like, it's like death by a thousand cuts. Like at one point, does Apple be like, okay, now $300 a month, you can still have your photo? Like, I don't know, I have no clue.
If I find out, I'll tell you.
Yeah, please do. Please do.
All right. Thank you, Jill. John Prescott, you're next.
Hi,
And Jane.
Dan. I'm just wondering if and when you lose an SSB disk, so in other words, it wipes everything on the disk. Is there a risk that could wipe all of those files from the iCloud drive as well?
No, I mean, unless your iCloud drive's storage destination is on that SSD disk. So, you can tell, I don't know if you can tell iCloud Drive, but you can tell other cloud storage solutions like Dropbox Box or where you want to store those local things. And if you store those local things on an SSD and the SSD vanishes or wipes itself or whatever, then your cloud storage is going to assume that that's what you desired, that you wanted to wipe those things, and it will delete them for you. Fortunately, with almost all cloud storage solutions, there is a way to recover lost files. They don't actually delete them for about half a year. So usually you get 180 days of backup. So if you do accidentally delete some files out of cloud storage, just log into your cloud storage and say undelete.
Okay, I get it. Thanks.
All right. Thank you. Jane Wood, you're next. And Peter, you're after Jane. Go ahead, Jane.
Hello. Thank you for all this. I use an external hard drive for time machine backups. And sometimes when I eject it, and I'm ejecting it properly, giving it time, I'll get that message it was ejected improperly. So there's two questions really. One is why does this happen? And the second is, when I get the disk ejected improperly, should I run it through the disk utility of what do they call that? First aid, fix it, or what are your thoughts on that? Thank you.
Yeah, I don't use a time machine backup, so I don't know what Mac is doing with that hard drive. Like when you go to eject it, and you go drag it to the trash to eject it, the volume should dismount from the desktop or wherever it is, and then you're safe to remove it. But if you remove it before it finishes ejecting, it'll give you that warning, disk was not ejected properly. For drives that are not SSDs, so they're spinning disk drives and are formatted as macOS extended journaled, improperly ejecting a drive is kind of no big deal. That's what the journaled is for. So it looks like a bad warning, but it's actually not a huge issue. But if you have like a SSD and the SSD is formatted as exFAT, I would be very careful not to improperly eject that hard drive. As far as like needing to run first aid, I doubt it. I don't think it's a drive issue. I think it's a software issue. I think it sounds to me like when you go to eject it, something is still hanging on to it and it's not finishing ejecting before you're pulling it.
Okay. Yes, it is journaled. It's not that exFAT. It's journaled. So it sounds like it's not a big deal and I can reuse it and not figure that it's inadequate.
Yeah.
Very helpful, Brian. Thank
Yeah.
you.
You're welcome.
Question for you, Jane. How old is that drive?
Well, it happens on drives that are like only a year old. But you know, I have had some ones that I've hung on too long, you know, that are maybe 3 years old. But yeah, it's not particularly excessively old.
And your computer is a what?
It's MacBook Pro M2.
Okay. And how many things are plugged into this computer?
When I do the backups, just the
Okay.
charging cable and the drive.
All right. Just thinking of things to do a little troubleshooting. Sounds like yeah, it sounds like it could, as Brian said, could be a software issue.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you, Jane.
You're
Go ahead.
welcome. Thank you.
All right. Peter and then John Prescott. I apologize for bumping you, John. All right, Peter, can you unmute yourself and ask your question?
Yeah, you bet. Thanks. So I use the OWC Thunder Bay enclosure. So it's a Thunderbolt interface, and the enclosures require software-based RAID. There's a program called SoftRAID. And there was a great solution for years. But the problem is now that with the Mac OS security changing with every release, with every one of the last 2 or 3 releases, SoftRAID is broken. And you talk to SoftRAID and they say, well, Apple needs to change such and such. And so they give some kludgy workarounds. But I guess the question is it time to abandon SoftRAID and look for other solutions?
I abandoned SoftRAID like 5 years ago. Not me. I didn't have drives from them, but they were part of a recommend, or I would like recommend drives to people. And I used to do work. I do work with OWC, so I was like, oh, like these are pretty solid drives, and people seem to like them. And I did a lot of research, and people seem to like them. But every single person that took an OWC drive would be like, hey Brian, I'm having trouble. Hey Brian, I'm having trouble. And I was like, what's going on? And it was like constant OWC drive failure, constant. SoftRAID was an issue. OWC enclosure was an issue. OWC drives were an issue, like always an issue. And I was like, all right, I'm no more OWC drives, no more SoftRAID, like hard no on all of it, basically. Like get the heck out of there, move on to something that's actually going to keep up to date with Apple security measures. I mean, Apple security changes all the time. It's a huge issue, especially in the M1 machines, especially on 10.13. Like it's a real kind of nightmare for software developers right now. So yeah, like if you find a place that's going to stay more current with what Apple is doing, so you can upgrade if you wish and not be nervous about losing operational operability, then yeah, move on.
Thank you.
Okay. John Prescott, did I get your question answered, or did you ask your question?
Yeah, it's done. Thanks, Cheetah.
Okay, thank you. All right. All right, Alan, can you unmute yourself and ask your question, please?
Yes. Am I okay in volume?
Yeah, you're okay.
Okay. First of all, a comment on the person who had desktop that wanted a big display. You can go with a Mac Mini and an external monitor, which I have this combination, and my monitor is nice and big. So in the absence of an iMac, a current Mac iMac, you can get a iMac Mini with an M2 and an external monitor, and that combination is not a whole lot more than an actual iMac. So anyway, that's one solution. But also, I'm wondering, do you use any of these cloud things? You talk about Dropbox. Do you use any of these other companies that have cloud drive? And if you do you recommend one over another, or you just don't deal with them at all?
I use all of them, honestly. I have to use Box.com for certain clients because of security measures that I have to use. I use Dropbox for all my business stuff. I use Google Drive because I can't get people to not use Google Drive, and I hate it so much. You know what I mean? Like hate it with a burning passion, but you have no choice. You have to. I use frame.io. Like I use all of them. Dropbox is my favorite. It's the one that I use. It's my workflow solution is Dropbox. Dropbox, but frame.io is what I use when I have to transfer large amounts of storage to people quickly, because it takes the full speed of your internet tunnel, and uses all of it. So if I need to get something up at a fiber at a 1,000 megabits speed, that's what Frame is for.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Alan. Mark Blackman, can you please unmute yourself and ask your question?
Yes, I was wondering, can you use the spinning external hard drive off an iMac as well as both Time Machine and then for external storage that you want to put stuff on? Or do you have to partition it or anything?
No, you can use any spinning disk drive you want, just plug it in. Yeah, I mean, it's, and a disk drive is a disk drive is a disk drive. Like if it plugs in and it mounts, it's good to go. Obviously, when you get a new hard drive, always format it, so it matches your needs. External drives should always be Mac OS extended journaled, not APFS, not exFAT unless you absolutely have to share it with a PC user. But yeah, Mac OS extended journaled. Once you receive a new drive, that's what you want to format it as.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, it looks like we have gotten through most of the questions. Does anyone, Michael Tulper, please unmute yourself and ask your question.
Well, I wanted to know in terms of, have you used Backblaze? Have any thoughts about it for backing up?
I haven't used it myself. I have somebody who does use it and they like it. I don't like a thing that backs up when it feels like it, I guess. I guess I kind of want it, like, I want to see my backups happening in the moment. I want to know without a shadow of a doubt that things are backed up the way I want them to be. I want to be able to access them and tell my online service like what I want it to do. Like, my understanding is Backblaze is sort of like at the end of the night, it'll like back up your changes and put them somewhere. And I'm like, that, I don't know, I don't love that. It like makes me a little nervous because it's like I don't really know what's going on up there. I want to be able to pull them down quickly. Like, I want a backup that I can work at my office, push file save, run home, and my saves are there. And I want to be able to like open up my project file at home now, because let's say I got to run home and walk the dogs, run home, walk the dogs, and I want to work at home now. I just want to be able to work in both places, knowing that I have one consistent source of truth that is this cloud storage destination.
Okay, great, thank you.
And that's what Dropbox does very well. Any other questions? Anyone?
Yeah, Chia, this is Mike again. I forgot to ask. You said you wrote an article on using Dropbox. Could you tell us where that you might find that article?
Yeah, where is that? It's on OWC somewhere.
You want to send that to me, Brian, and I can put it in our group's IO chat if you can't find it right now.
I'll find it, and yeah, I don't know where it ended up. I don't even know if it's still up. I'll have to find it.
Okay. All right, wonderful. Okay. And I think that if we don't have any more questions, Giovanni, you've unmuted yourself. Did you have a question?
Okay. My question was about partitioning. Isn't that required if you have to run two OSs, like you have a virtual window that you want to run?
Like a Windows machine and a Mac machine?
Yes.
No, so you don't need to do a partition. It wouldn't help you anyway, because then that partition would only show up in one place. You know what I mean? And each partition would only show up in one place. It would be useless to you. So if you want to have one hard drive that you can put on a Mac or a PC at the same time, between two different systems,
I was thinking about the virtual running Windows, in a virtual space.
Sorry, understood. So like a boot camp.
Yes.
I thought they got rid of that. Am I right? Am I right about that? They got rid of that, right?
Yeah.
I used to do it. I used to do boot camp on an iMac like years ago.
Yeah, but you could use like VMware, for instance.
I guess the answer is I don't know why you would. I would just get a Windows machine, and because they're so inexpensive. If you need a Windows, I just every time I did Windows running on a Mac, it didn't work correctly. I don't know if it's better now. This would have been 7 or 8 years ago that I did this. But yeah.
Okay.
I just wouldn't do it.
All right, Giovanni, does that sort of answer your question?
Yeah, sure.
All right, thank you so much. We still have time. Anyone else with a question they'd like to ask of Brian? While they're thinking, so I know you should back up everything. So I want to know, how many drives do you actually buy at a time? Because if I want to back up something with my computer, even if I'm out, if I'm purchasing drives, I'll purchase 2 or 3 instead of one immediately. So how many backup drives do you have?
I have dozens. I have so many hard drives. I couldn't even tell you. I have so many hard drives.
Okay. Why not use Jim Corbin? Can you please unmute yourself and ask your question?
Sure. You said not to use APFS on an external drive. I wonder why not.
It's not for external drives.
Oh.
Yeah, that's why. It's not for them. It's for your internal drive.
Thanks.
Okay. Lawrence Jenkins, you have a question. Please unmute yourself and ask your question.
More of a statement. I happen to use Synology, and I do video editing, but it's not professional, it's just for me. And one of the things that I do is I do all my editing on my internal drive, and then move and store everything on my NAS. And it cost me about $600 altogether, and I have two 14-inch spin terabyte, 14 terabyte spin drives, and they're RAID, so I can, it reads one and reads the other. I've been pretty happy with that. What do you think about that?
Yeah, so that's in the video that I put in the present. I'll send a link to the video to Cheetah so she can share it with everyone. But he kind of goes through that in the video and discusses that workflow. And it's great. It's, if it works for you, it works for you, and that's really the important thing. If it makes sense for your workflow, then absolutely do it. Personally, I don't love it, but again, I'm not you. So like if it's working good, if your system works, do your system.
Okay, great. All right. Shita has a question about if you're doing video. I've always heard that you don't want to have the video on the same drive. So if I were working in Premiere Pro and I was working in exporting video or even working on video, should I have an external drive that has that video as I'm working? How should I do that?
Well, you can put the video on anywhere you want. I mean, so the actual media can be anywhere. You can link to it from any place. It's, Premiere is not Avid. You don't have to be that specific about where the media is, but of course you should be very organized and don't go losing media. Most of my media, most of the time, lives in Dropbox. It's on my local system. So it's in a folder that Dropbox is actively syncing on my local system, and I'm linking to it in Premiere and working off of it. But there are many projects like these, for example, where the media is too big for the internal system, so it's on these external drives. And that's great. So, if I need to work on that project, I just plug in this external drive and we're working, and when I'm done, I just unplug this drive. So it's not constantly working this drive.
Okay, good to know. Don Winfrey, can you please unmute yourself and ask your question? Don wants to know, where do you store drives off-site?
Well, I have an office in a house. So basically, if I'm going to make a double physical backup, one in the office, one in the house.
Okay. Frank, can you please unmute yourself and ask your question?
Yes.
Try it again. Go ahead.
Super duper. Will it give me a backup of my system and files that I can then take and restore to another Mac?
That's a time machine. A time machine backup will do that. So just
System,
a hard drive. Yeah, it'll do
operating
everything.
system, the whole thing.
Yeah. Time machine does everything. Yeah. But you can also, by the way, when you get a new Mac computer, if you still have your old computer, you can plug them in together. And when you start up your new Mac computer, it'll move it all over.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Any other questions?
Yeah, I have a question about.
Go ahead, John.
You're using Dropbox then, almost like a NAS drive?
Yeah, I basically treat Dropbox like a NAS.
Okay, so that, multiple people, and you can give permissions on Dropbox to who has can actually get the things, but they can't get to everything.
Yeah, so you can share them a specific folder that they're allowed to work inside of, and that's the only thing that they'll see. It depends on it depends on how you set up your Dropbox, how you set up your team. It depends on if they have a Dropbox account, if they don't have one, how you want to work with them in that way. So there's a lot of complexity to it. But once you kind of wrap your head around how it works, you have a lot of room to build a workflow around it.
Do you you don't use Dropbox for a backup though, or it is like
because it is constantly backing up. So basically, it is a backup. So it's like those files are local. Those files are on Dropbox as well at all times. They're always being backed up. So project files specifically are always being backed up to Dropbox. And then media is probably in multiple places as well, depending on the client, depending on the job, depending on where the media came from. Like it's not always my job. So sometimes I'm given a hard drive that is a duplicate of the media. So like that is 3 backups right there.
Okay, thank you.
Brian, how does the new changes with Dropbox affect you?
Not yet. It hasn't happened yet. So I don't know.
Okay. Yeah, because
we'll
that puts a big monkey wrench in how you might be able to use Dropbox, or if you can use it at all.
I use it on my local system, so it won't impact me, but people who do use it on external systems, it will impact them.
Okay. Okay, so typically your Dropbox size is what? Or your Dropbox capacity?
Probably 150 terabytes or more.
Okay.
I don't know. It's quite large. It's unlimited. I have an unlimited Dropbox.
Okay, so with the changes that are now being enacted, you would have to have that on your computer in order to No.
You can still do offline. You can still do offline sync.
Okay. All right.
Yeah,
very interesting.
That's not changing. What's changing is the location of your Dropbox folder needs to be in something called locations.
Right.
It's already happened to Google Drive and it has already happened to Box.com. It has not yet happened to Dropbox, but it's going to eventually. And then the other thing is that because it's in a place called locations and you're not allowed to change that, if you were putting your Dropbox folder on an external volume, you will no longer be able to do that.
That is correct. But yeah, because I switched mine over last week, and the changes are right there. Okay. Any other? Jane, you have your hand up. Do you have a new question?
I do. So
please do. Go ahead.
Thank you. So for the external hard drive where I back up Time Machine, I use 2 different kinds of 2 terabyte drives. One is a Oyen Digital U32 Shadow, it's called, and the second is a G Drive Armor ATD. And I'm just wondering what you think of if one of those is better than the other, or if you can recommend one that's even better than those for the next time. Yeah.
Can you ask it one more time? Just because I need to hear it one more time.
Sure. I do time machine backups using a 2 terabyte external hard drive, and I use ON Digital U32 Shadow, and the other one is a G Drive Armor ATD. I'm just wondering if either one of those, any comments on those, or if there's another brand that you would recommend above those. Yeah.
Those seem fine. I mean, I don't know if I'd be the person to ask. I mean, I think the best place to go is to go read a ton of user reviews on those and make sure that those drives are good. Like get it from a large variety of review sources and try to make sure that like people aren't on the regular saying, "Oh, this drive constantly crashes on me," or "This drive failed on me," or like just do that kind of research, basically.
Okay, will do.
All right. Okay, I want to thank you, Brian, for your time, your presentation. I really appreciate answering all of the questions. Can everyone please unmute themselves and thank Brian?
Thank you, Brian.
Thank you, Brian.
Brian.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks a lot.
Brian.